I'm really thrilled that Penny's asked me to come today. When I got the theme of honesty, I was like, how do I turn that into what I do? Because my social enterprise is called Our Mel, and we do stuff for Black History Month, but throughout the year as well. So I was a bit like, this is a bit weird. But then I realised actually what we do is we have honest discussions about race, and that is basically what we do. So so here goes, here's my talk. So I'm fat, I'm black, and I'm a woman. That's what you see when you first look at me. Fat, black, and women. But there's more to me than that. So many layers behind the skin. 1,000 thoughts behind the eyes. I'm fat, I'm black, and I'm a woman. I also suffer from depression and tried to end my life 9 years ago by walking in front of a car. I was drowning in thoughts of self-loathing, of loneliness and pain. I hated my existence, I hated my surroundings, and I wanted to do anything to block it out, even if it meant dying. Thankfully, a friend of mine saved my life by pulling me back to safety, and it's taken a combination of therapy and healing for me to be in the mental place in which I stand in front of you today. I've had to face my demons, slay my fears, and work hard to become secure in the woman that I am, but it's come at a cost. I don't think depression ever really leaves you. You just learn how to cope with it, the triggers, the feelings of unworthiness and mistrust. One of the ways in which I coped was writing. So I wrote and self-published a book, which I published on Amazon. And really, it was just blog pieces that I kind of merged together and then sold for like £1. So you can buy it on Amazon if you want, but you really don't have to. So fast forward a few years ago to June 2016. I was one of the organisers for the Sheffield Black Lives Matter rally that happened, and I was really affected by the growing amount of deaths at the hands of police in America. And so we, a group of us, there was about 5 of us, we basically created a march, and we had almost 1,000 people who came along. Did any of you here come? Yeah, oh cool, that's great. So it was a really amazing experience. But for me, that march kind of really woke me up because I've lived in Sheffield 9 years, and like I've basically spent majority of those 9 years just being depressed and being in my room and like going to work and coming home and not doing anything. And so that kind of really was what woke me up, and it stirred back up the passion that I had for art, social justice and community cohesion. And it became the driving force for founding my leading social enterprise, Our Mel, which is dedicated to exploring Black history, cultural identity and heritage. The talk from race is far from over, the talk about body image is far from over, and the talk about who I am as a woman in spaces which aren't created for me is far from over. I mean, if you look around the room right now, the majority here of you are white, and it's always really interesting for me coming into environments because I'm very aware of conversations that I talk about or what Our Mel deals with. We live in a world that revolves around a Eurocentric idea of what beauty is, a normative set of predetermined qualities that constitute acceptable ways of presentation. As Sophia Andrew puts it in her essay, Deviant Bodies, to not fit in is seen as wrong, it's seen as awkward, it's seen as a bit odd. And it's always really interesting when I call myself fat to someone and they're like, no, you're not, you're beautiful. And I'm like, 1 minute, did I say I was ugly? Because I'm pretty certain I didn't. So where did you get ugly from? So as a fat person, I constantly feel like I have to explain the reasons as to why I'm fat. And if you're friends with me on Facebook, I'm constantly posting every now and again about, oh, I've ate this, or I need to exercise, or this, that, and the other. And so it's interesting because I have conversations with like my family, my mum, dad all the time, and some of the things that come up is, are you fat because you're depressed? Are you fat because you don't know how to cook? Are you fat because you need professional help? And sometimes they say that it's because they love me and care about me, and that's why they bring these conversations up. And I'm like, okay. And like after so many years, you just kind of block it out and I don't really care anymore. But it's interesting because I always think that you can't simply just be fat. You always have to have a reason, or you always have to be aiming to lose weight. But in our society, we're always rewarded with certain things if we do lose weight. You know, you get job promotions. It's harder to get a job if you're quite big. And we're rewarded with being seen, with being heard. And fat shaming happens in our everyday lives all the time. Echoes of oh, I feel fat today, and that's usually said by a thin white woman who clearly is not visibly fat. I've never had that luxury of just being able to utter those words as a feeling. I am fat visibly. And my fat is not in the right areas, places of a hypersexualized body, which is what is represented to me within the plus size industry. My body is not an hourglass figure, it's an apple, and my fat is all over in the wrong places, or so it would seem. And when a few years ago, my niece came home and she was really upset because a few girls at school, my niece was 3.5 at the time, she's now 6, but some of the girls at school were like calling her names and all this at 3.5 because she is quite chunky. She's the sweetest child ever. And I was really like shocked because I was like, she's 3.5 and she's already having all these like feelings of not appreciating who she is. And I wanted to kind of protect her and wrap her up and and just protect her from everything that was going on. But the Western standard of beauty marginalises. It creates exclusionary spaces which make us feel inadequate. So what hope is there for us if at 3.5 our children are already feeling like that? White women can't even adhere to it. So how am I as a woman of colour ever going to be able to? It's quite frankly exhausting. And earlier on this year, I took part in a podcast called The Naked Podcast by Jen and Kat from BBC Radio Sheffield. Has anybody in here been on it? Yeah. Oh, no, you've not been on it. Okay. But you've heard of it. And the concept is quite simple. You're interviewed about your body naked on a sofa. So it was really awkward to start off with. And they came to my flat and I was like, I opened the door and they're like, hi, we've come to interview you. I was like, oh, okay. So like, and you just literally, it was just weird experience because you do take your clothes off. They start talking to you and interviewing you about who you are, what you do, and you're naked. All three of you. It's bizarre. But I absolutely love the work that they're doing with it. And the more I got into it, I actually forgot that I was naked, and it becomes this kind of liberating experience. We were just 3 women sat on a sofa talking about ourselves, our shared experience of weight, self-esteem, our goals and what we wanted to achieve. We saw who we were beyond the clothes, which in some sense is our source of protection. You can actually listen to my podcast, and what I didn't realise, I had tons of messages back from it because I was in a really kind of emotional place when I recorded that, and I almost actually cancelled on them that day. So the whole podcast is more or less me about to cry, which I did cry afterwards, but listen to it. But you see, I want people to see me as who I am, see me as fat, see me as visible, and not try to change me. So if you flick the slide to our Mel, you can't really see it because of the light, but this is our Mel. So as mentioned earlier, I'm the founder of our Mel, and in Sheffield last year, a new festival celebrating Black History Month, which is now in the UK in October, was launched by myself and Gabriella. Gabs has just had a baby, which is really exciting. But the idea developed out of a mutual love for our city, as well as the realisation that there was a gap on Sheffield's cultural calendar. And one of the things that really propelled me was I used to commute to work to Doncaster, and I'd get the train. And down by Sheffield Hallam, there's the city board, Festival City board. You've probably seen it, it's that pink board. But you go along that board, and like you can literally, there's probably one festival, which is Migration Matters, that really kind of, puts events on or does things for the BAME community in Sheffield. And so that kind of for me was something that I was like, right, Black History Month should be on that board. I don't know why, like it's missing off Sheffield's calendar, but it was. So that was kind of something for me personally. I was like, right, we're going to get Melanin Fest, and that's going to just make waves in Sheffield. So as the story goes, Gabs and I, we didn't know each other. She approached me after the Black Lives Matter march, and we had the idea of creating events for Black women. We met a couple of times. The first time we actually didn't like each other, and then we met the second time, and we kind of just realised, okay, probably do have similar ideas. I'm quite serious sometimes, so when I've got an idea in my brain, I'm like, right, that's how I want to do it, and that is what I do. Whereas Gabs is kind of more chilled, and she's like, yeah. So we connected our ideas together. And then Melanin Fest was born on the 8th of November 2016. So from then on, our Sundays were spent at Gabs's. We were chatting, eating. We literally just immersed ourselves in event planning, and it was really great because we met Nick Simonite from the Frog and Parrot. And so he kind of became our mentor for basically Melanin Fest, and kind of propelled us, and we showed him our plan of what we wanted to do. And he was just brilliant in kind of pushing us forward with it. So we were very conscious, me and Gabs, that Black History Month isn't just in October. It should be celebrated all year round. And being black is more than just our skin colour. So the idea from our Mel is we explore black history, cultural identity, and what it means to be a person of colour in Britain today. We named our Black History Month festival Melanin Fest, purely because melanin is the pigment that's in all of us, and our Mel, we wanted to keep it Yorkshire, so we just kept the kind of R, you know how you say like our Gabs or something like that, and the Mel is literally like half of melanin. But everyone thinks I'm called Mel, so I always get this whole, oh, are you Mel? I'm like, no, I'm not Mel. So we launched Melanin Fest on the 1st of October 2016 at the Frog and Parrot, and across the month we ran over 43 events in Sheffield, and then we hosted 5 events in London, so we created a second festival essentially. So in London it was awesome. We had 5 panels down in London, and we had Randa Wayland, who's the head of diversity at the BBC. She was on the panel, and we had various other film directors and musicians, and that was great. And then in Sheffield we collaborated with both the universities, Theatre Delhi, various other venues that have gone out of my brain, Showroom Cinema. So now, a year later, we've actually hosted over 60 events in Sheffield, London, and we've just launched in Leeds as well. So 2 weeks ago, we held a creative marketing social masterclass down at ITV, and then we've also held workshops at Yorkshire Water, and then tomorrow we're taking over the Leeds Industrial Museum, and we're basically filling it with activities for kids, film screenings and loads of stuff. So it's actually interesting for me because I work in marketing. So, I do. So obviously I'm having to market 2 festivals. So obviously I'm marketing South Africa Fest and I'm marketing Melanin Fest, and it's obviously happening on the same day. So it's been very obviously in 2 different cities, but for me personally it's been an interesting experience. yeah, that's the right word. So basically with our Mel, our mission is to support, encourage, teach and build the community through music, film, art and education by creating safe environments for learning where embracing cultural heritage is encouraged. The motivation behind our Mel is that representation matters, stories matter and history matters. It's about making sure the voices of black people and people of colour are centred and talent is showcased right here in the North. In British schools, growing up, learning about black history is not a compulsory subject. And I actually grew up in Milton Keynes, that's my background, that's where I'm from. And I was one of a handful of 5 black kids in my entire school. And I never really felt like I fitted in. My teachers were white, my friends were white, and the people that I would read in my storybooks were white. And I remember being at school book fair and I wanted to read a book, this morning, right, I only just remember the name, and I've said this a few times. And the book was called Mr. Majika, and I loved reading that book. And my mum was like, no, you can't read that. You have to read this book by Mallory Blackman, who I was like, who's she? And so now she's a highly esteemed black British author. She was the previous Children's Laureate, and she was more recently one of the playwriters behind the new series of Doctor Who, which obviously premiered here in Sheffield. And this week, she wrote this week's Doctor Who episode. So Mallory Blackman is an absolute pioneer. She opened the doors for so many children like me to see themselves represented in the books that they're reading. There seems to be this reoccurring theme when history is taught in today's Britain, and a narrative of British history in the UK curriculum is whitewashed with British triumph and rule, with the history books distorting, misrepresenting and omitting the real story of black people. An example of this is the Moors in Tudor times, black African people who had conquered and ruled in Spain and they came to settle in Britain. So a lot of people think that we were brought here on Windrush, but we actually weren't. And I was never taught this in school. The same goes for the Victorian era. I'd never once seen a black Victorian in school. However, since founding our Mail and researching history, I've come across the most stunning images of black Victorians. Go check it out because they are absolutely beautiful. If we then move to feminism, and I am a feminist, and it's really interesting within the black community because there's all this like, oh, we shouldn't be feminists because it's from like white people and stuff. But if you look at history, American history, with white feminist heroes such as Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who they argued actively against the rights of people of colour, we see then a different side to the women's rights movement. And black feminists such as Shirley Chisholm and Fannie Lou Hamer, who were also part of the fight in the right to vote, they're kind of neglected and left and forgotten about. And so for me, being honest, which is no longer on the board, but we need to celebrate these moments in history, make sure a full representation of history is taught, not just the triumph of Britain. And talking about race is always an interesting subject. And probably many of you in this room are a bit like, oh, why is she talking about race? This is really uncomfortable. We don't like to see colour. And some people are vocal. Some people have kind of strong opinions on it. Brexit taught us that. Some people aren't sure how to talk about it. And some of us, we shy away from it. We don't want to talk about it. And with our Mail, what we do is make sure that these conversations about race can happen, and they should happen. And we create a space where people can feel safe in expressing their thoughts without fear of judgment. It's like, I'm always up for talking about anything, and I talk a lot, so I'm like, yeah, I can discuss that. But we also want to open up the floor for new learning, share our experiences, share kind of our thoughts. And so we host events and we invite leading scholars. So last year we hosted David Osologa, who's an amazing historian. This year we had Renee Adelodge, and we were or are having Afi Wahersh. Unfortunately that event got postponed, but she is coming. And so we want kind of historians and people to kind of talk about their research, whether that's in a community venue or in a university setting. But the idea is so that everyday normal people like me and you can go and access these talks, not just academics, because in that way we're all kind of expanding on our research and learning together in a safe and fresh way. And we combine our talks with music events, spoken word and film screenings, and we do art exhibitions as well. So this summer, I was really keen to explore the beauty of black women and what it means as a black woman to love myself. And so I advertised on social media for local black women from Sheffield to come and be part of an exhibition that we were going to host during Black History Month. So we put a call out for social media. We had tons of black women who were like, I want to be a part of it. So the response I had back was astounding. And I actually had one woman who travelled all the way from Liverpool to come and be part of this. And I was a bit like, she turned up on the day with her suitcase. And I was a bit like, what? Like, this is great, but we're only a little like small organisation in Sheffield, and she travelled all the way up, and like she was only here for 2 hours and then she went back. So I just want to play the video because we created a video which we are developing into a 30-minute video on what it means to be sort of black and self-love. Hi, I'm Annalisa Toccara and I am the founder of Our Mail, which is a social enterprise based in Sheffield, exploring cultural identity, black history and what it means to be a person of colour in Britain today. We are here outside the Winter Gardens and we are creating a photo shoot that will be part of an art exhibition showcasing October as part of Black History Month, looking at black women, our beauty, our strength, our struggle, and also exploring themes of mental health and wellness and well-being, because that's all something that's important to us all. And as a black woman, it's so important to self-care and self-love. We're working with different organisations within Sheffield to kind of create an arts and cultural festival, putting black representation at the forefront and obviously our talents and our excellence.
Well, my name's Nina and I do photography and videography.
My name's Naomi. I'm from London but I study in Sheffield because Yorkshire is wonderful. I study chemistry, I like to cook, I like to bake, I love clothes, I love jazz, hip hop, blah 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 blah. And I love my fellow black women.
Hello, my name is Ayamiko and I came all the way from Liverpool.
My name's Danielle and I'm from bloomingbrain.com. I'm a blogger and I've come along to this photo shoot today because I think it's important for us as black women to be represented positively and in a positive light through videography or photography.
Hi, I'm Maria.
Hi, my name's Kim. I live in Sheffield and I saw that Annalisa had put something on Facebook about inviting black women to come and have their photographs taken, and I'm not very good at having my photograph taken. I really dislike it because I don't feel very confident about my body, so I thought I'm going to give it a go because it'll make me feel a lot better and it will be part of my self-love journey.
So the reason that I chose to do this shoot was because I thought it was quite important to showcase all of the talent that black women in Sheffield had to offer.
For me, when I look at myself, I would say I haven't made progress. But then when I look at the person that I used to be, like let's say 2-3 years ago, I've made so much progress. So I think one thing for me, self-love, is recognizing my progress.
I think it's quite hard with all the images that you see around about women, for sometimes black women to feel as if we're beautiful and worth loving.
We've got this mainstream perception of what beauty is, and unfortunately we often don't fall into that.
I've had to look at myself and be like, okay, you kind of have, with self-love, you're basically tearing yourself apart to rebuild yourself again. Because it's like you have to take out all the gunk.
Growing up in my particular skin, I can remember times where for example, I'd go home and I'd arrange all the mirrors in my mum's room so that I could see my face like profile side on. And I'd start like fiddling with my nose and that, trying to get it to look more Roman or aquiline or whatever, because growing up with Barbies and whatnot and not really seeing yourself represented very often, even though you know that everyone comes the way they're made and like that is completely valid, it doesn't really help with the wanting to fit in. So I did spend a lot of my time growing up thinking, if my nose was thinner, I'd be prettier.
I don't even think Western women can adhere to the culture, the beauty standards, but I think it's obviously a lot harder for us as black women. I think it's really undermining. I think it impacts on our well-being, and I think the more that we see more images that reflect us, our beauty and our ways of being, that will impact on our well-being and impact on the well-being of our youngsters.
We have seen more of a growth of black women being represented in the media in terms of beauty. So I think it was a few months ago I saw a black woman on the front cover of the Boots Beauty magazine, and you are starting to see us represented more in Cosmopolitan and magazines like that. But it's still not quite where it needs to be. It's come a long way from when I was in my teens, and it is nice and refreshing, especially to see women with the natural afro hair as well.
I think we've got to challenge a bit more and just be confident in our own selves, and that's really hard because I know how I feel some days when I just don't feel that that's what I want to do.
Beauty comes in all shapes and forms, and we're all beautiful.
Now I'm older, I'm smart enough to know that all of that is bull, to be honest. Like, you don't need to alter oneself to find yourself attractive. Like, beauty truly is in the eyes of the beholder. So if you hold yourself well, people will behold you well. End of story.
You get so caught up in the process, you forget to enjoy the process, you forget to actually enjoy the journey. And I'm at that stage where I'm learning to enjoy the journey now.
Don't allow anybody to bring you down because of your beauty. Don't allow anyone to bring you down because of the way you look, because of the way you talk. Just ignore whatever they say and just be yourself.
And it's so scary to put that vulnerability out there, especially because we want to be perceived as these strong black women. But to me, showing your vulnerability is a sign of strength.
Address the fact that your self-love doesn't need to depend on the love of everyone else. Like, you don't need external validation to find your own value. And I think it's important to really remember that when you start comparing yourself to other people or just other ideals of beauty.
Myself to think, oh, how's this person going to look at me? How's this person going to react? Because people are going to react so many different types of ways.
When you start to realize your worth in your value as a black woman, I think you can achieve kind of amazing things. And just as a
community, when we kind of band together and help each other, we can achieve even greater things.
This hunt for normalcy we all seek is just farcical and like a never-ending race that nobody can even win. So to even enter it is just to put yourself at a position where you're losing all the time. And why be like that when you can just love yourself and love others?
So that was our video. It's only 5 minutes, but it will be 30. And so, thanks. And for me personally, representation matters, and we need black women in areas like archaeology, history and politics. We need greater opportunities for black women to become radical archaeologists, historians and politicians, because how can our past, present and future be represented when we aren't being fully represented in these areas? And we need to be honest about where we are in conversations on race, and put a cap on racial and gender equality, and be using Kimberly Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality, considering how a person's identity intersects and connects to create different circumstances and combinations of privilege and oppression. Ask yourself, how does my identity intersect with my race, my sexuality, my class, my gender? As a woman of colour, my activism is a part of who I am. It's my lived experience. Every day being in the struggle, having to live in a society where whiteness as a structure is upheld. Activism is so much more than holding a placard and screaming social justice. It's about making a difference in the spaces in which we exist and hold. It's hard and it's tough, and there are times when I don't want to do it anymore, and I'm at that place right now. And there's no escaping it. Our Mel is bold. We are breaking barriers. We're speaking up for those who previously shied away. We're making history in Sheffield. We're creating an open and safe space for those who identify, and we're smashing the glass ceiling. Black history is British history. The two are mutually entwined. We can't have one without the other, because history is what shapes us, defines us, and it helps us move on together. We all have the power to teach our children accuracy and truth. And in order for us to be limitless as creatives, we need to be honest with ourselves on the subject of race. I am Jamaican, I am Welsh, I am black and I am mixed raced. I am a feminist and I am a woman. I recognise that half of me as a race is steeped in colonialism and white supremacy, and the other half is the oppressed. I am fat, I am black and I am a woman. So let's be curious about the world around us, the universe that gave us birth, because you are the whole universe and every one of us is equal in her eyes. Thank you.